Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to give it a couple of seconds while everyone comes into the room. Good afternoon, GB. Good afternoon, Mike. Hope you guys are doing well.
Doing well.
Thank you.
All right. So very quickly, I wanted to announce that we are pleased to offer this event through the Community Navigator Pilot Program and the U.S. Pan-Asian American Chamber of Commerce. With that, I'm going to share my screen really quick, GB, so I can do a quick intro.
Cool.
There we are. Again, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lauren Simpson, and I'm with the SBDC, or the Small Business Development Center. We're a national program with over 1,000 locations throughout the country. So regardless of what state you might be in, you should be able to get connected with a small business development center. And you'll want to do so because we offer no-cost services to local small businesses. And they're at no cost to you because they're your tax dollars at work. So your tax dollars have already taken care of all of our fees. So you might as well take part in our resources. For the Los Angeles network, which is the network that I represent, we have locations throughout the Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. And you can see those locations represented by the map in front of you. Again, we offer no-cost business advising, and so you're able to be paired with one of our fantastic business experts. They have expertise in the areas of marketing and finance and taxes, business planning, whatever it is that your business might need, we have resources for you. Again, they're free. And then we also offer virtual trainings, much like the training you have joined today. Please be sure to get in contact with us. The phone number is 866-588-7232, or you can reach us online at smallbizla.org/new client. For those of you who have connected with us outside of the Los Angeles area, please go to americassbdc.org/find-your-SBDC. With that, I'm going to stop my screen share. Quick housekeeping, please keep your questions on topic. GB and Mike will speak to what those topics are, but please be sure to keep your questions on topic and put them into our Q&A to ensure that they can see your questions. And then the chat will be reserved for any additional information, i.e. links that GB or Mike would like to share, and or links that I'll share with you as well, including my email address in case you'd like to get in contact with either one of them. So with that, thank you very much and enjoy the session. Handing it over to you, GB, or Mike.
Thank you. Well, GB, how's your week been?
It's been productively busy. What about yourself?
Good. No, same here. Same here. I have some good news regarding EIDL.
Perfect.
The SBA is still funding EIDL applications because they're quote unquote recycling funds. What that not everybody took advantage of the program that could have, right? They were approved and take the money. So those funds are going back into a bucket and then being reallocated out to some folks. So all hope is not lost. Some people are still getting funding. However, don't count.
Correct.
All right.
If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, c'est la vie.
Right. But there is a little bit of hope there. One other point, GB, you'd be interested in this. One of my clients was suspended by the FTB for failure to make the payments in a timely manner, right? So the client did not file his tax return with the state because he thought he'd get an automatic extension. He found out that actually you do not get an extension.
Correct.
With the FTB if your entity is suspended.
That is correct.
That was actually news to me. I didn't know that.
Oh, I see.
I was like, really? They do that?
Yeah.
And you can be suspended for many reasons, right, GB?
That is correct. There are multiple reasons, even as much as not filing your statement of information, which LLC files every 2 years, corporations file every year. Failing to file that can also be cause for suspension.
Right. So get your tax returns in on time. But more importantly, pay the fees.
Indeed. Yeah.
And get your returns done.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you bring it up because it's one of those things that a lot of people just assume, including many CPAs also just assume that, and they're unaware that a suspended entity is a big deal because no extension and anybody and everybody that you have a contract with can easily get out of the contract because you're no longer a viable entity. So if you have people, customers, clients tied into a long-term contract, your entity gets suspended, they get a free pass and they're no longer obligated to work with you because you're no longer legally authorized to operate in the state of California.
Right. So maybe sometime in the future, you can talk about how to negotiate an installment, what to do if you can't pay.
Actually, that's a great idea. Maybe in the next week or two, I'll talk about that because especially right now is not a good time to be suspended. To a short story, a person came to me with the similar thing. Hey, GB, I just found out, I do my own taxes. I just found out I got this big penalty bill because I'm suspended. Long story short, got the whole thing sorted. The last person who was supposed, most people working at FTB, SOS are good people, but this one individual basically said, hey, I don't care. I'm on retirement mode. I'll get to it when I get to it. And I pleaded that my client is losing money and face and contract and everything. This person did not care. So this is not a good time to be suspended.
Great. Thanks for that little sidetrack.
Yes,
please,
indeed.
what are you talking about? Please?
Today, we're talking about sales and use tax, but predominantly we're talking about use tax because a lot of people don't know what use tax is. So the topic of the day is sales and use tax, but predominantly use tax. So I'm going to share my screen. Do you see my screen?
Yes,
Perfect.
we have it.
Excellent. And I'm going to move this over here so I can control my PowerPoint. Okay. Use tax. If I were to ask you, not you, Mike, but if I were to ask our attendees, all 19 of them here, what is use tax? What comes to your mind? Either in the chat or in the question and answer, type in, what do you know about use tax? I want to get a baseline before we get started. So this is your moment to participate in the chat box or in the Q&A. Type in, what do you already know about? Oh, one person already said no idea. Good. I like that. Anybody else going to type in? Let's see. Sales for personal use. That's part of it. That's a very small part of it, but good idea. Another person, no idea. We'll give it maybe 10 more seconds to see anybody wants to chime in. 9, 8, 7, 6, 3, 2, 1. Tax on sales. That's sales tax or sales into state. That's part of it. Maybe I should, no, Ray, that's not part of it. And heard the term but not clear. Purchase on non-taxable item, that's part of it, Alejandro. So good, at least some people have some idea and some people have no idea. So good, you're in a good room. Use tax, we'll talk, actually, let's get some definition through first. Let's see. What is sales tax? Let me just ask that question. We'll take maybe 10 seconds. When you hear the word sales tax, what is it? Who wants to answer that in the Q&A or in the chat box? What exactly is a sales tax? We know income tax. Some of us know payroll tax. There's property tax. What is sales tax? State, so let's see. Some people are saying state's collection of state customers. That's partly true. Extra costs we pay when we buy taxable items, which goes to state, partly true, good. Collection of sales tax for the state, yes. But sales tax. Now, the reason why I'm defining definitions is because the way you may see things and the way the state sees things can be very different. And sales and use tax, I have done presentation on this topic, on average, 12 to 16 hours. So I'm condensing everything that I usually cover in 12 to 16 hours in 45 minutes. So bear with me. A lot of things I will not cover, but definitions I will cover. And the reason, like we saw, what was it, last week or the week before, when we were talking about the Cal Savers, the way you think you define employees is very different than state. So sales tax, what is sales tax? It is an excise tax, not an income tax, not a payroll tax, not a property tax. It's an excise tax. And what is an excise tax? An excise tax is a tax you pay to engage in a certain behavior. You don't engage in that behavior, you don't pay the tax. Income taxes, you make money, doesn't matter how you make money. You are an engineer, you're an accountant, you're a prostitute, doesn't matter. You make money, you pay taxes, it's all good. Excise tax is a tax on a behavior. You smoke, you're gonna pay the tax. You don't smoke, you're not gonna pay the excise tax on cigarettes. You drive a car, you're gonna pay the gasoline tax. You walk everywhere, you're not gonna pay the gasoline tax. So what is sales tax? It's an excise tax, which is a tax on a retail transaction, not wholesale transaction, retail transaction, which only occurs when the title or the possession is transferred to the end user. This is how sales tax is defined. It is taxation on the behavior of engaging in retail transaction when the title and or the possession of the said good or service is consummated to the end user. This is why some of you who have resale certificate, you are not the end user. You're buying something to sell. You are engaging in a retail transaction, but you're not the end user. So any one of those attributes triggers sales tax. And the state, all states that have sales tax, some states do not, we know that, Oregon doesn't, Alaska does it on a statewide basis. So those states that do have sales and use tax are sticklers for definition of sales tax. And if any of those attributes happened and you did not collect or pay the sales tax, you get in trouble. And this is why definitions are so important. So what triggers the sales tax is a retail transaction made to the end user. And who pays the sales tax? Any idea? Well, it depends. It depends, and we'll talk about that because the sales tax is levied on the end user typically, but the US Constitution defines or actually has the parameters that define who the end user is. And thus, you pay the sales tax or the use tax. So you can see how this stuff can get very complicated very fast. And this is why there's some CPAs who only specialize in sales tax, and there's some who only specialize in use tax. It's a multi-million-dollar tax industry because there are a lot of definitions, and here's a kicker. Every state has its own definition. So for those of you who are in drop shipment or thinking about starting a drop shipment, I see ads on Facebook and I see ads on Instagram. Hey, start your own Amazon business. Fulfillment is easy. Oh man, you have no idea the nightmare you may be facing because now your goods are being shipped to multiple states, and Wayfair versus South Dakota changed all of that. So making money is easy, but the definitions can get you. And then we'll talk about nexus. What exactly is nexus and how does that affect sales and use tax? So these are some of the definitions we'll define today. I'll define today to make sure you have the proper understanding, the proper execution of sales and use tax. And like I said, a bunch of this will be structured around use tax because that's been around for many years. But for the last few years, the states have been far more aggressive in collecting use tax and even the sales tax. So before we get started, Mike, anything you want to add to it, anything that you know of it, anything that you want me to cover specifically when it comes to sales and use tax?
Yes, you mentioned the term drop shipment. I don't know that everyone understands what that means.
Good idea.
So you might want to define that.
Drop shipment is basically you are a jobber. Some of you may know what a jobber is, but basically you are no longer touching the product. Usually it's a product. that is being sold, you are basically matching the supplier and the buyer. And you are a middle person who's using your own marketing efforts, creating your own stores to buy something from here to sell to somebody. And you are just dropping shipments all over the place using technology such as Amazon, fulfillment by Amazon, or even Facebook got into it. Walmart has its own store now for online transactions. Home Depot does it too. I mean, almost every retailer and their mama has gone into the drop shipment business, and it has made the sales and use tax compliance challenging,
Difficult.
to say the least. So drop shipment is you're not buying something, you're not putting in your warehouse and selling it. You're just matching buyer and seller basically.
Yeah, you're not taking physical possession of the product.
You're not taking the physical possession. The moment you do, the whole transaction changes. And as I have mentioned before, the contract, the sales order and the purchase order are contracts that define when the sales tax was triggered or when the use tax was triggered. Yes, sir.
Yes, but don't confuse physical possession with legal possession.
Yes, exactly. This is why the definition of sales tax is when the title or the possession changes hand. You may never, this is why drop shipment, you are changing the title. Somebody has something somewhere and you're saying, send it to them. The title is shifting. You never took the legal possession of the product, but that your actions may trigger sales tax or use tax compliance. So this is why the state is very stickler about, much of a stickler about it, title and or the possession. Sometimes you may get the possession, but it's a consignment. Somebody's consigning. We see those. We see a lot of antique stores around Long Beach. They never take possession. I'm sorry, they never take the title.
They never take legal possession.
Exactly. Yeah. They're just saying, hey, there's a wall and there's a corner over there. You want to put your stuff over there. And if somebody buys it, we'll take a cut and we'll give you the money. They took the possession, but never the title. So be careful about that. This is where title loans, all these things that come around, they can trigger sales and use tax. So be very careful. Now going forward, if you have questions, please put it in the Q&A box. If I ask you a question, put it in the chat box. All right, so there are different types of states: seller privilege state, consumer privilege state, transaction privilege state, gross receipt sales. Basically, every state determines who is liable for paying the sales tax. In all of these states, the seller, which is you and me, are always liable for collecting and remedying the sales tax. But if improper sales tax is collected, who's liable? Whom is the state going to go after? In the seller privilege state, the seller is liable. So if you don't collect the proper sales tax, if you correct improper sales tax, if you forget to collect sales tax, hey, guess what? You cannot go after the customer. The state will never go after the customer. They will come after you. You have to dig deep in your pocket to pay this tax. In a consumer privilege, the consumer is liable. In a transaction privilege, both are liable. In a gross receipt, usually the seller is liable. So if you're guessing what state is California, well, California, being a blue state, is a seller privilege, which means you as a business owner are liable for collecting and remedying sales tax. But if you fail to collect, or if you collect improper amount, because some of you may be having those, what is it called, food trucks, and you're always moving your business around. Every city has its own sales tax. So if you collect improper tax, it's on you. You cannot go after the customer. So Arizona is a transaction privilege where they will go after anybody. So if you ever take your business across state lines because you're going for a convention or you're going for a conference and you're doing business there, or you're doing a pop-up or you're doing drop shipment, because each state has its own liability attribution, you have to be careful about that. So California is a seller privilege. You have to do it. Use tax. Any idea what use? Actually, we already talked about it. So use tax is complementary and supplemental to sales tax. What does that mean? You see the shirt I'm wearing? I bought it online. Why? Because I was on an airplane before the pandemic hit. I used to travel extensively, and I saw an ad in an airplane magazine. I was like, oh, looks like a good price, looks described as a good quality, 6 months money back guarantee. Sure, I'll order it. I didn't know this shirt came from England. Now, do you think the company in England collected sales tax on it? No, they didn't, because they're out of the country. They have their own GST and their own VAT, value added tax, in Europe, but I'm in America. So because being an accountant, do you think I just saved myself 10%? Because if I had gone to Nordstrom's and bought this shirt, I would have paid the sales tax? Well, because I'm an accountant, I cannot play the card. Oh, I didn't know. I'm using this shirt in the state of California. I liable for paying my own sales tax that the state would have collected if I had bought this shirt in California. I have to take the value of the shirt that I paid, take 10% and pay to the state of California on my personal income tax return. If I'm a business owner, if I buy something out of state, I have to pay use tax in the state where I am using it, hence the word use tax. Now here's the kicker. You pay sales tax once. You buy this shirt at Nordstrom's, cool, you paid your 10%, you're done. Use tax, you pay over and over and over and over again. So if I wear this shirt to the state of Arizona and I'm there for a period of time, they will not do this, but legally under the tax code, they can tell me, hey, GB, using this shirt in Arizona, pay up use tax. Oh, you're going to New York, pay up use tax. You're going to Nevada, pay the use tax. You pay sales tax once, depending upon what you're doing, you may end up paying use tax over and over and over and over again on the same item. And we'll talk about that briefly, why. And sales tax is paid by the seller. Doesn't matter if you're a seller privilege state or a consumer privilege. If you sell something, it is your responsibility to collect, file your CDTFA tax return, and pay the sales tax. Use tax is filed and paid by the buyer. Why? Because I am buying it. I am using it. The seller may not have nexus with the state of California or any other state. It doesn't matter. And this is where also, when it comes to sales tax, it's political. For example, in the state of New York, you go to a bagel shop and you buy a bagel, you don't pay sales tax on it. If you tell the shopkeeper, because it's a food item, it's grocery. Many states, including California, does not tax groceries. Some states do, like Arizona. It's a transaction privilege state. They tax everything. But New York doesn't, groceries. They don't tax clothing either. So if you go shopping in New York City, you may not pay because it's clothing, it's an item. Well, actually, New Jersey, sorry, not New York. But on the flip side, if you tell the shopkeeper to cut the bagel in half because you're in a hurry, you want to spread the cream cheese rather fast, the mere act of a knife going through a bagel makes it a cooked item, and you will pay sales tax on that bagel. In the state of California, if you're buying gold, if you're buying a gold bar versus a gold coin, can trigger a different sales tax. The dollar amount of the gold can also make a sale. So a lot of people right now, because of inflation, are buying up gold because it's an inflation hedge. Depending upon where you buy the gold, what is the shape of the gold, and how much gold you're buying, you may pay sales tax or you may not. And gold is expensive, so you can see how this stuff can add up. So somebody just asking why, when you buy something duty-free, do you still report the use tax on it in your state of residence? Generally, when you're buying duty-free, I'm assuming you're buying duty-free in a different country because you're bringing it in here, then yes, you on that duty-free, it was duty-free in that jurisdiction. So if you're in Europe and you buy something at a duty-free shop, you don't pay the GST or you don't pay the VAT, which is the value-added tax or the goods and services tax, equivalent to our sales and use tax. So if you buy something duty-free, you bring it in your state where you're using it, you pay the use tax. So yes, you gotta pay tax somehow, some way. So why is use tax there? To, just like how Maya said, to avoid tax evasion. The great state of Oregon has no sales and use tax. None whatsoever. They do not tax. They don't have this tax there. Do you think it might be fruitful for someone to go to the Long Beach airport, buy a $200 ticket to the state of Oregon, buy 5 laptops for their office worth $5,000, not pay 10% sales tax, which is $500, and have a $300 savings because they paid $200 for the airline ticket, but they save $500 in sales and use tax because they borrowed in Oregon. The moment they bring that to California, hey, buddy, pay up the use tax. Otherwise, it can be an easy tax evasion. You can imagine somebody taking the same flight to Oregon, buying 5 MacBook Airs, which are so thin now. I think you've seen the new ad for the MacBook Air, and you buy 5 iPhones in a carry-on bag. You can easily smuggle $10,000 worth of goods and avoid paying sales tax of $1,000, and all it cost you was a $200 airline ticket. You could have somebody meet you at the airport. I mean, it's just another form of smuggling. This is why people smuggle cigarettes across state lines, because California heavily taxes cigarettes. Anything you want to add to that, Mike?
No, let's talk about why these taxes are in place, right?
Yes.
There's political issues,
Yes,
right? And there's practical issues.
indeed. The practical issue, may I talk about it, Mike, or do you want to add to it?
No, go for it.
So actually, I'll get to the practical issue in just a moment. So
Okay.
of course, there's always political, and Leslie is asking what industries fund this tax in general? All industries. Doesn't matter what you do. You use something in your home state that should have been taxed, a good or a service, you're gonna pay tax, you're gonna pay use tax on. Doesn't matter you are an accountant, you're a lawyer, you run a machine shop, you run a car wash, you are a prostitute, you are anything. Doesn't matter what industry you're in, you're using something that should have been taxed, you're gonna pay use tax on it. And it's a huge, huge, huge tax evasion, and we'll talk about it in just a moment. So Leslie's saying, realistically, who gets the bill? Nobody. It's a self-compliance. And if you ever get audited, which the audits are going up, and the state is using algorithm where they're looking at your bank accounts and your credit card statements, they're looking at the metadata. If they suspect, or if your employee says, hey, I was in a presentation where GB or somebody else talked about use tax, I know my boss never pays it. Hey, state of California, go audit them. And whatever you collect, give me 10%. It's like any other, so nobody will give you a bill. It is an honor system as of right now. You are, and this has been around for the last 60 or 70 years. It's just nobody was enforcing it because pre-internet age, nobody cared. It was a very small fraction. With the advent of the internet, drop shipment, and all of these attributes, everybody is now liable for it. Will you touch on free trade? No, I'm not. This is not a 16-hour presentation, so yeah, that's like a whole different nut to crack. So sorry, Maya. And then is a tax rate same as a sales tax? Yes, and not just depending on your state, depending on your jurisdiction. When I'm in Irvine, the sales tax is only about 7%. Long Beach is 10.75 or something. So even your city can define how much use tax you pay, because the use tax or the sales tax is state level, then the district level, and then the city level. Because City of Long Beach said 3 years ago, we need to improve Long Beach City College. We're going to levy a higher tax. So you have to know.
That's an example of a practical reason why.
So depending upon you
Right.
using the laptop that you bought in Oregon, you're using in Long Beach or Irvine, makes a difference in your use tax. So keep that in mind. All right, triggers, online sales. You buy something online, you buy something on Etsy, and this is why I always tell my clients, look at your invoice. Amazon, a couple of years ago, was forced that any and all transactions that happen on their platform, they are liable to make sure all these sellers on Amazon are either collecting it or Amazon will collect and pay it. There was a huge lawsuit that happened. But if you're buying something on Etsy, if you're buying like something like this on somebody's private website, and that gets shipped to you from North Dakota or Hawaii or somewhere else, well, guess what? Chances are they did not collect sales tax unless they have Nexus, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But if they didn't, you need to tally up all those totals. What were my personal purchases on Etsy or anywhere else? Did they collect sales tax? Was it subjected? If I had bought this in my local neighborhood, what have I paid sales tax? Okay, I'm going to pay that use tax with my California tax return 540 when I do it on TurboTax or with my CPA next year. If I'm buying something from a business, you need to get a CDTFA account, and you have to file that use tax on a monthly, quarterly, or whatever basis that you need to. If you already have a sales tax permit, it will ask you, do you have any use tax to report? So keep that in mind. Import. You import a brand new car or you import something else. This is where, for the last couple of years, Long Beach Port does a monthly filing with California CDTFA, who's importing what. And they may send you a letter. A lot of my clients receive these letters on a monthly basis. Hey, we learned that you just imported something, and we know you're not a wholesaler because you don't have an account with us. What's the purpose of this thing that you imported? Could be anything. Are you going to use it? Where's your use tax? So they're getting much smarter. They're tying in with different, CDTFA has even gone so far as tying in with the IRS. I have one of my clients who received a letter saying, hey, 3 years ago, you reported sales of X, but IRS told us your sales were Y. Why did you not report? He said, well, others were wholesale. You never told us. So by default, he got a big tax bill, and we're in the process of fighting it. I think my client will end up getting some money back, but they're getting very smart about use tax.
Let me jump in here for a second. I was in an office at the SBDC office in Hawthorne, El Camino College. Client came in, woman was selling online, a couple $100. The city said, you need to pay a business permit. How'd I find out about it? She had filed for a seller's permit, CDTFA.
There we go.
The CDTFA talks to the cities talk to the CDTFA, and now the IRS is being contacted.
Yeah.
So don't think just because you're sitting behind a computer in your own home, selling a few things online, they're not going to find out. They will.
Exactly. And Leslie asked a question, can you use a typical product subject to use tax? Realistically, example, a boat. I'm not sure, Leslie, exactly what you mean by that. So if you can clarify that in the Q&A so that Mike can also monitor it, that would be helpful. I just have these boxes open. I usually don't have them open because I
think what she's talking about, for example, typical thing is you want to buy a motor vehicle. Right? So maybe if I have a particular type of motor vehicle, you might buy a 65 Chevy Corvette. So you go to Las Vegas because that's where it's at, and you acquire that vehicle there and then you bring it to California. So the question is, do you pay sales tax in Nevada? Do you pay sales use tax here? Or do you pay both?
Good question. You pay both. And again, depending upon the situation, Nevada wants a sales tax because that's where the sales happen. Now you're using it in California. California wants its share. So
right. So you can't escape it.
No, and you used to be able to. You used to be able to, back in the day, 20 years ago, before the internet, you could do anything and nobody knew anything. The celebrities will get away with anything, but nowadays, anything and everything is public. So it depends. So going on with the triggers, we talk about import, resale, self-creation. Sometimes some people say, well, you know what, the heck with all these taxes and everything. I'm going to go live off the land, live in a cabin, and I'm going to just make my own stuff. I'm not going to buy and sell anything. I'm going to be self-sufficient. Great. Self-constructed assets are subject to use tax. You are, if your neighbor, this happened to one of my clients, he didn't want him there. They were both white guys. They wanted to just live off in the woods. And the first guy who was there before said, why are you here? They got into a little turf war. And the second guy who was my client was building some stuff. He contacted CDTFA because he knew about self-constructed assets and the use tax. And he got a big audit bill because he created his own garage full of stuff. And California said, hey, buddy, calculate your labor cost. If you had hired somebody, what would you have paid them in labor? Calculate your raw materials. Let us know how much it's worth. If we agree with your assessment, great, give us a tax bill. And if not, we'll send you a bill that we think is the assessed value of your self-constructed asset. So don't think you can go live off the grid. If California finds out, or any other state, they will tax you for using something you built using raw materials, your own hands. So
We have a question, GB.
yes,
Leslie received an import tax request, or can she opt out if she provides her EIN for tax or something? I don't even understand the question. What would you suggest?
if you have maybe you imported something and they're asking you what is the purpose of this thing. If you are reselling it, then you can use your resale exempt permit to say, no, I imported it, but I'm going to sell it to somebody else, another distributor or retailer. I am not the final end user. I'm not engaging in a retail transaction for personal consumption.
So Leslie, if you have a seller's permit, you can create a resale certificate. With a resale
Correct.
certificate, you provide it to the vendor, and then you don't have to pay sales tax, but you collect
Exactly.
sales tax from the end user.
Exactly. Exactly. So intra-company transfers. You buy something in California, you have a subsidiary in Arizona, you transfer that stuff over there. Arizona wants its use tax. You move it to Nevada, you got to pay use tax in Nevada. Interstate transfers. So you're moving stuff around, just like in the previous example, is subject to use tax. Out of state rental. So if many of us have rented cars. When you rent a car, just like when you rent a hotel room, you pay a special tax, not just even the sales tax, you pay a tourist tax. And I mean, they just level up the taxes, all the different excise taxes that come up with it, right? This is why a lot of my clients who are in Airbnb, they get notices from the city, hey, you're running an Airbnb? That sounds like a business. Looks like you're running a hotel. Collect and pay this tax because that's what you're doing. They don't want you to have an unfair advantage over Hilton or anybody else. Even a local motel owned by somebody, it's like, hey, I'm paying this tax. That Airbnb is not. What's up? So out-of-state rental, if you rent something in Nevada and you bring it into Arizona or California, you paid that excise tax to the state of Nevada, you need to pay California share to California. Warranty repairs, storage. If you store your goods, you're not even selling them, you're not even using them. If you store your goods in any state's boundaries, you got to pay use tax and sampling, of course. Now, the question that Mike brought up earlier, why? Why am I paying you this? I already paid California. I already paid Nevada. Why am I paying you just for storing my stuff? Here's their reasoning. Because you are using our stuff. You moved your goods into our state using our roads. You caused wear and tear on our roads. You got to pay. Oh, by the way, you are in our state. You're from Long Beach. You are in Las Vegas. Somebody holds you at gunpoint. You're going to call Long Beach Police Department? They're going to come rescue you? They're going to come investigate? No. You're going to call Las Vegas Police Department. You got to pay. You're using our police. You're storing your goods in a warehouse in Arizona. If it catches fire, you're going to call Long Beach Fire Department to come to put the fire out? Or if you call 911 and the local Phoenix Fire Department picks up the call, what are they going to say? Well, oh, I'm sorry, you're from California? Burn, baby, burn. I don't care. Call Long Beach Fire Department. Click. You're going to use our fire department. You use our resources, you got to pay. Because we don't want you to have an unfair advantage over the Arizonians, Californians, New Yorkers who are paying the sales tax that is funding these public services, nurses, police, fire. I mean, everybody wants to pay teachers more, right? Cool. We're going to jack up the property taxes. Housing crisis gets even worse. So this is why they use tax to pay teachers as well. So all of this stuff, again, like some of this stuff is political. You know, politics, there's office politics, there's family politics, and there's geopolitics. Cannot escape it. But beyond that, there is, you use something, they're saying you're using our resources, you got to pay to play. Does that answer your question, Mike?
Yes. Now, there are some states that don't impose these taxes,
Yes.
but do not assume that they're not going to make it up in other areas.
Correct. The great state of Texas does not tax income taxes, but they tax everything else. California has a lot of exemptions from sales tax because they have an income tax. Texas says we do not tax income, but talk to Texans. They hate their sales and use tax because the government is going to make the money one way or another. So in Washington doesn't have income tax. Oh, they have a lot of sales and use tax. You should look at their liquor tax. I was there once. I bought a bar of liquor for 25 bucks. Sorry, 40 bucks. The same liquor I buy in California for 25. $15 went into excise taxes because the state of Washington does not have income tax. Some other states have
And the
property
state of
taxes.
Washington has a lot of other taxes, including
Oh, yes,
additional
yes.
taxes on employees.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, the whole idea is the states have a huge Swiss Army knife. Payroll tax, sales tax, use tax, this tax, that tax, whatever tax, tourist tax, 9/11 tax. I mean, they just have a whole bunch of stuff. So they will get their money one way or another.
They're going to get it.
Exactly. But the use tax is the one thing, especially nowadays, a lot of people engaging in interstate transactions you need to be aware of, because each state has a different source of liability, as we talked about earlier. So use tax can have many, many, many triggers. Let's talk about nexus. What is nexus? Anybody? Actually, no, we don't have too much time, so no more questions. Nexus is what connects us. And nexus could be different for income taxes, payroll taxes. Right now, I'm talking about nexus when it comes to sales and use tax. In 1992, I believe, there was a huge US Supreme Court case in which Quill Corporation went to court taking North Dakota over some sales tax issue. And in that case, the justices at the time ruled the bright line test that if you have some physical connection to a state, the state can collect sales tax and or levy use tax. A couple of years ago, 2015, I think it was, there was some sales tax issue that went to US Supreme Court. And in there, I think it was Justice Kennedy, who has since retired, basically said in his opinion, I think it's high time we revisit Quill versus North Dakota. This is why the case of Wayfair versus South Dakota happened. And it's a very interesting case. I love reading about it. It was just amazing how it went down. But what basically Wayfair and South Dakota did is said, the states can no longer solely rely on physical connection. Economic connection can also create nexus. So if you have enough sales in a certain state, you have nexus, you must collect sales tax, because use tax, as I believe somebody brought up earlier, who gets the bill? Nobody gets the bill. It's a self-compliance, it's hard to enforce. And this is why it comes with higher penalty, because when they catch you, oh, they're gonna knock you out, depending upon how big you are also, and how egregious your mistake is. So Wayfair basically said, and South Dakota, if you have economic connection, you are to get a sales tax permit in that state. So if you're a drop shipper, chances are you may have to get sales tax permits in maybe 30 states, which means if you do enough business, and each state has its own definition, if you do enough business, you may have to file a tax return every single month. Can you imagine 360 tax returns you have to file at minimum every single year? The compliance that comes with it, because some states like California says you must file monthly if on average you collect, what is it, like $50 or $60 in sales tax per month. It's a very low threshold. Very low threshold. Like that's like $10 of sales tax per day, or maybe $20 worth of sales tax per day. So if you are selling maybe, I don't know, a laptop or an iPad used or whatever, you got to do a monthly filing. Good luck. And if every other state requires it of you, good luck. 360 tax returns you have to file, plus the state income taxes. So we haven't even talked about that. If you have enough sales in that state, you have to do income tax return, plus you have to do the IRS filing. You're looking at filing 400 or more tax returns every single year. That's more than one tax return per day. And some companies do it. But your overhead will go out of the roof. And this is why drop shippers more often than not get in trouble, because they didn't account for all of these compliance costs. So so beyond, actually, Mike, do you want to add something before I move on, sir?
No, he had mentioned the e-commerce sites, Amazon will do that for you.
Yes. Oh yeah, because for example, what creates nexus beyond the economic nexus? Ownership of property. So this is where, for example, maybe you live in California and you run a business and your business is sole proprietor or a partnership. You don't have an LLC, you don't have a corporation. You or your partner owns a vacation home in New York. Guess what? You are your business. You have physical presence in the state of New York because you or your partner own a property. You don't run as a corporation. You are a sole prop or a partnership. Whatever you own, your business owns. Whatever your business owns, you own. There is no legal separation. You have to get a sales tax permit in the state of New York. So people think, well, ownership of property means my business owns something. Nope. Second one, office space, branch, sales room, warehouse. So maybe you're a drop shipper selling on Amazon. Amazon will decide, especially if you're doing fulfillment by Amazon, which a lot of drop shippers do, Amazon will dictate and decide where your merchandise that you're not touching will be stored. Maybe they store it in the great state of Indiana. Guess what? You have physical presence in the great state of Indiana. Get a sales tax permit. Oh, and next month they store your stuff in Texas. Texas permit. Nebraska permit. I mean, Amazon has fulfillment centers all across the state lines. And they store your stuff and you have no say in it. You have nexus, my friend. You better get a sales tax permit in that state. Forget the economic nexus. Employees or agents. There was a big case a couple of years ago, maybe 20 years ago. Some of you may have heard of the company Scholastics. They used to sell encyclopedia. They still do, but this is back in the day, 20 years ago, before the internet was so out there. There was a big case which basically said, hey, Scholastics, you didn't collect sales tax. Well, we're not supposed to. We're wherever we are. No, you are in all 50 states. What are you talking about? Well, remember how you gave your teachers the forms to give it to the disadvantaged students so that they can also get encyclopedias for free? Yeah, your teachers are your agents, but we never paid them. It was a free service. Well, that's nice from an income tax point of view. From a sales tax point of view, you are engaging in business in all 50 states because you sent free forms to all the teachers who acted as your agents. And Scholastics lost that case. So maybe you're running a business, maybe a corporation, maybe an LLC, maybe a partnership sole prop. And your mom lives in Florida and she's answering phone calls for you. You don't pay her, she's just your mom. Or your roommate who's helping you is now living in Wisconsin. He's your agent. Your mom's your agent. You're not paying them, doesn't matter. We're not talking about income taxes here. We're talking about sales tax and use tax. So be aware of that. Advertising, canvassing, peddling. So this is where some states even say if you store cookies on somebody's computer, you have physical presence. So your IT policies can also affect that. And if you do advertising, that can affect that. And delivery other than common carrier. So maybe you are going to deliver the goods yourself to your friend in Nevada. Well, guess what? You were physically present doing business in the state of Nevada. Nexus has been created. And once the nexus is created, it's hard to get rid of it. Just like we talked about it with the CalSavers. Once you have 5 employees, you have 5 employees as the state defines them to be. You fire 3 people, doesn't matter. So any questions on Nexus that I did not cover, you want to add to that, Mike?
No, that's a great review. Please continue.
Thank you, sir. Now, of course, storage is a big thing. People say, well, what if I have a trucker who's driving through the state of Arizona to take the goods to some other state, and he comes to a rest area and is resting? Does that mean storage? Oh, you'd be surprised. States used to do that. Like, hey, your goods were stored for a couple of hours in our state. And what if there was a fire? Whom would you have called? Ghostbusters? No, you would have called our local fire department. So because of that, they used to levy these taxes. So what the US Constitution has basically said, states cannot tax interstate commerce. So because of that, if there's a break in transit due to safety or to a circumstance that is beyond your control, no use tax is due. And you don't have nexus for sales tax purposes. So if you ship your goods from Nevada to the Long Beach port, and there's a strike at the port and your goods are sitting here for 3 months, will the Long Beach Fire Department put the fire out? Yes, they will. Will the state expect a use tax? No, the strike was not your doing. But same scenario, the goods are sitting in Long Beach port because your order got canceled. So you're just holding the goods to see, okay, can I find a new buyer? This is at your discretion. You have to pay use tax. So, and the other thing is the tax has to be fairly apportioned. So this is where your depreciation rule kicks in, right? When did you buy something? What is the current value of something that you bought 5 years ago? What is the current value that determines how much use tax you pay? So if they come and audit you, they will audit you. They will look at your financials. And did you fairly apportion the tax or not? Of course, there can be no discrimination because there used to be provisions where the state will say, well, if use tax is 20%, sales tax is 10%. No, they cannot discriminate between in-state and out-of-state suppliers and vendors. And they must give you some benefit in return for the use tax. So yeah, we'll put your fire out, we'll send the cops over, we'll let you drive on our roads, and we'll not ask you for your papers and all that stuff. You gotta pay to play. So when is it due? Well, if you're a personal individual who's buying stuff and not paying sales tax on it, you have to pay once a year with your income tax return 540 that you filed with the state of California. If you're a business owner, you may have to pay use tax on a monthly basis, quarterly, biannually, or annually as the state has dictated to you by the CDTFA. So if you do your sales tax return quarterly, you pay your use tax quarterly. So this is where, if you are a retailer who's doing a monthly filing, you have to track your use tax liability because the matching principle, if you pay the use tax due now, 3 months from now, interest and penalties will accrue. It also depends if you're accrual or cash. It depends upon when the title passed, when did the ownership pass. And this is where, if you are big enough, and big enough is usually about what, $500,000 or $1 million in sales. That's big enough for use tax purposes. If you're big enough, depending upon how you negotiate your invoices, your purchase orders, your bill of ladings can determine, because you may think, hey, the title or the ownership did not pass. But if you buy something FOB destination or FOB origin, that determines when did the title transfer to you. So you may never have the possession, but the bill of lading says FOB origin. Well, guess what? That's when the title passed. For sales tax sales and use tax purposes, did you pay the use tax properly or not? So this stuff can get complicated very fast. Taxable basis, bad debts and accounts receivable. Why? Because maybe you paid use tax on something, but it turned out to be a dud. Or maybe you collected sales tax on something because you had nexus and somebody didn't pay you. You can make provisions for bad debts and accounts receivable accounting purposes. Finance and interest charge. On what do you pay use tax on? Some of you may buy cars at 0% down. I'm not even sure if they offer that right now or not because of the hot used car and new car market, but do you really think it's 0% interest? No, it's not. This is why they give you an option, 0% interest or $4,500 cash back. You buy something, depending upon what terms you have negotiated with the seller, and the seller says, oh yeah, we'll give you 0% financing, but they preclude you from getting a rebate. You have to pay use tax on the whole amount. So again, the terms you negotiate, sample withdrawals. Some of you may remember, I'm old enough to remember back in my day, we used to go to Napa Valley and get free wine samplings. Now, I don't find any free samplings of wine. Why? Well, inflation, cost of doing business, all those things are valid, but those wineries were audited because they were told you have a self-constructed asset that you're not paying sales tax on. But we're sampling, we're giving it away. Great. You're using it, right? You're producing it, right? Where's the use tax? So this is why, that was one of the reasons why there's no longer any free wine tasting in the city of Napa because of use tax compliance. So if you take any samples from your inventory, you have to pay a use tax on it. Occasional casual sales, you don't have to. So this is where I used to joke with my clients that if you have an annoying neighbor who has a garage sale every weekend, you can tell him, oh, hey, man, the sales and use tax compliance must be killing you. What are you talking about? Well, I mean, you're running a business, right? No, I'm not. I'm just selling my garage stuff. Well, you're doing it every week. It's no longer an occasional or casual sale. I went to a GB's presentation, and the state of California may say all the stuff you're selling, you owe sales and use tax on it. A lot of garage sales, they go away. And you can be a good neighbor because you're not yelling at them and taking their videos. You're just watching their back for sales and use tax compliance. So be mindful of that. Tax exempt. The only entity listed on here that does not have to pay any sales or use tax is the federal government. Everybody else on there has to pay sales and use tax unless they have a specific exemption. The only example I will use, you see religious institutions. A lot of times, a lot of people think, oh, my pastor from church came by to buy a big screen TV from my store. He's buying it for the church, right? So I'm not going to collect sales tax on it. He's exempt. He told me he's tax exempt. Nope. He's buying it for the church, but he's putting it in his common area where he'll be watching it. So you have to ask him, hey, pastor, what's the purpose of this transaction? Is it for the church or is it for your personal use? And sometimes people say, well, I don't want to sin against my pastor. I mean, God will hate me. God will forgive you. CDTFA will not. So make sure you document proper exemption, proper resale certificates, proper use, because remember, federal government is exempt, but you still have your document. Do people steal stuff? Can somebody like a federal agent, like the FBI guy, can come to you and say, hey, I'm here to buy something for the FBI local field office? Well, really, where's the proper authorization? Where's the proper purchase order? You have to ask those things because the resale, the number one audit risk when it comes to sales tax for most people is the improper acceptance of resale exemption. You have to take a copy of it. You have to take their business card. You have to document what did they tell you. And you have to train your salespeople because your salesperson may be too excited. Like, wow, this guy wants to buy 10 big screen TVs. My commission check is going to be great. He or she may not be thinking about sales tax compliance, use tax compliance. You are supposed to educate them on all of this stuff. Don't you feel used is my tagline. And if you feel used, pay the use tax. That's all I got, Mike.
That was quite a bit, and you distilled that down quite effectively.
16 hours into 45 minutes.
Wow. So great job.
Thank you, sir.
Do you have a thought about next week?
No, what were we talking about earlier to talk about?
We
next
talked
week?
about, setting up an installment, but how to deal with the federal government of the state of California, or any agency for that matter, if you're behind on your taxes.
Oh, yes, the suspension. Let's talk about that next week. So
The suspension, how to
Yes.
handle it, and how to negotiate,
Yeah.
how to revive it.
Oh, that's it.
Stuff.
It's gonna be fun. Let's do that next week.
Revival is not fun, but it can be done.
Yeah, I think only church revivals are fun, not the not the SOS or FTV revivals. No, they're not. All right,
That
well,
was a great presentation.
thank you, sir.
so
Thank you
much.
very much.
See you next week.
See you next
Bye
week.
now.
Bye, Lauren.